Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a little while since I last did a video. Work kind of exploded, but I've been doing the 50 book reading challenge. I've been mostly managing to keep up thanks to the use of audiobooks, which I can listen to on my commute back and forth. I have a pretty long commute, so I can usually get through about an audiobook a week, which is about the rate that you need to keep up with this challenge in order to, actually finish everything by the end of the year. So I have a lot to talk about. I think I have at least like 10 or 11, possibly even 12 things to get through. So I'm gonna go through them as quickly as possible. So for the first category, it's a book that made you laugh or a book that was funny, something like that. Anyway, for this category, I chose the book Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. As you might be able to tell from the state of my copy, this is not a new book. I have read this many, many times. However, I felt that it was appropriate given the fact that Terry Pratchett recently passed away, given the fact that this is one of my absolute favorite books in the entire world, given that the radio play recently came out and I actually was listening to it about a week before I decided to pick this back up again. I was actually about halfway through this when we found out that Terry Pratchett had passed away, so I really wanted to mention it and use it for this challenge. If you don't know, it's about the apocalypse. It's about an angel and a demon who have been living on Earth for millennia and have decided that they like the human race and don't really want the apocalypse to happen. So they're working to stop it. There's also the Antichrist, who's an 11-year-old boy named Adam, or something like that, 8, 11, something. Anyway, there's Anathema, who is a professional descendant. There is Newt, who is a witch finder. It's a whole lot of fun. There's a whole big cast of characters, and it's really, really funny. It makes me laugh all the time. I really loved the radio play adaptation. I thought that the voice of Crowley, which was the one that I was going to be the most picky about, because he's basically my favorite character in the novel, was perfect. He was spot on. And then the voice for Death was also fantastic. So I really loved the radio play. It updates it in a nice way because this book is about 20 years old now at this point. So some of the jokes, some of the references are a little dated, and also they're very British. So when you listen to the radio play, it gives it a sort of fresh new look at it. It obviously doesn't have all of the detail that this book does, given that the radio play was like 6 or 7 hours, and this is like a 350-page book, so this has more detail in it, this has, more jokes in it, this has more characters in it, but the radio play is a really fresh, fun way to hear the story and to, get accustomed to it. So I really love both. It's one of those situations where they just occupy different spaces in my head. I love the novel and I love the radio play, which I believe is available on Audible, and you might be able to stream it. I'm not sure. bbc.co.uk, you might be able to stream it for free, even like worldwide, but I'm not totally sure on that. But you can definitely get it on Audible, which is how I did it. And I believe the version on Audible might be a little bit longer than the one on the BBC version, like it's the extended edition. I'm not sure. Oh, one of the things that I thought was really fun that they did is since they aired it actually on the radio, there are scenes in the book where radio personalities will, become characters, and so they actually used like actual radio personalities of BBC Radio 1 that are currently radio personalities, so I thought that that was really fun. So next on the list is a book with a number in the title. So this one, I was a little bit proud of myself that I managed to find this one. It was 359 by Gretchen McNeil because it was only a number in the title. Anyway, this one was alright. I've liked some of her other ones better. I feel like the main problem with this one was that the relationship, like the main romance, was supposed to be the driving force of the plot, and I didn't actually find it convincing because we're supposed to believe that this guy that cheated on her is this catch, and I just didn't buy that. So that was sort of my main problem with it. Basically, the whole idea of it is that there's this girl who discovers that there's this parallel universe, and at 3:59 twice a day, the two universes touch, and she can see this girl on the other side that looks exactly like her, but has this different life that seems really idyllic, and then they end up switching places, and of course it turns out that this other girl's life is like this nightmare world. But anyway, yeah, so 3:59, it wasn't bad, but I just didn't think that it was that convincing, and I've liked some of her other ones better. I liked 10 better, which would have also been a book with a number in the title, but I've already read that one, which is a modern day adaptation / homage to Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. That one's more just straight up thriller. This one's like sci-fi thriller / horror, so it was okay. The science part of it was kind of mumbo jumbo-y, but whatever, it's a YA novel. I didn't really expect it to be like flawless. So like I said, it was fine. but it wasn't great, and I really did not find Nick, the male lead, remotely appealing, so that part of it didn't really work for me. So the next one on here is a graphic novel. This is one that I actually just finished reading last night. I read Nimona by Noelle Stevenson, which is, it was originally a webcomic, which I did not read when it was a webcomic. I just somehow missed it, even though I was following Ginger Haze / Noelle Stevenson on the internet and I knew that it was a thing. I'm just really bad at remembering to follow webcomics. Like, I never remember to check them, and I find them a little bit tedious because I don't really like reading graphics on my screen. So yeah, I just never got around to it, even though I knew that I would probably really enjoy it. So when I was at the bookstore and I saw this on the shelf, I decided to pick it up. And yeah, I really liked it. It was really charming. It had a lot of heart. It was really funny. I liked all the characters. I really like the aesthetic. It's this weird mix of like medieval armor and modern day technology where like they're all calling each other on video screens, but they're all dressed like medieval knights. It's fun. And Nimona herself is a fun character. She's a shapeshifter, so it's this character. And basically Ballister is like this supervillain, and I can't remember his name, Ambrosia or something like that. Anyway, these guys are arch nemeses, and he works, so the blonde one works for the Institution, which is nominally the good guys, although that becomes more complicated, and then Nimona teams up with Ballister because she wants to be his sidekick. So the art in this one is really dynamic and really expressive, so I found a good example of it. So this is an example of Nimona's shapeshifting. It's from early in the novel, so it's not really spoiling anything. So she goes from, you know, being a girl on the counter to being a cat on the refrigerator. So yeah, it's a really fun novel. I really enjoyed it, and it won't take you very long if you want to pick it up. So the next category I filled was originally in a different language. This one was another graphic novel, but it was originally in French, and the graphic novel is called Black Sad. I only have volume 2 here, even though I read volumes 1 and 2. Volume 1 is somewhere in my roommate's stuff, and I didn't feel like digging it out. It's very crime noir, which is not really my thing, but it was well done for what it is. I'm not really into noir that much. So, but all of the characters are anthropomorphized animals, and the art is really, really gorgeous. So if it is a thing that you're into, noir stories, then you would probably like this. So here's the cover of volume 2, so you can see what I'm talking about. This is the main character, this cat here. He's the detective, so his name is Black Sad. And then like here's another example of the inside of it. You can see how they're all animals in the background. Maybe the light might be reflecting, but you should be able to see. And so really my problem with this one is just that it's not a genre that I particularly enjoy, and there were no female characters that were not victims in one way or another. So there's nothing really wrong with it per se, just wasn't really to my taste. So if that is a thing that you're into, then you'd probably like it. And the art is really, really good. So if that appeals to you, then, you know, go for it. I do have a couple to talk about that I don't have physical copies of. So the first one is one that came out the year that I was born, which was 1989, so you can do the math on that one. And I decided to read the first of the Miss Fisher murder mysteries, which was Cocaine Blues. You could kind of tell that it was from the late 80s. Like, it just kind of had that late 80s feeling to it. It's set in the 1920s. If you don't know what the Miss Fisher murder mysteries are, I discovered it because of the TV show, which was a whole lot of fun. It's in the middle of the 3rd season right now, and I'm enjoying it immensely. The books have a different feeling to them, so I didn't like horribly dislike it. The plot was pretty much the same as the pilot episode of the show, but I don't know, it just didn't really do it for me the same way that the show does. So if you, like me, were really desperately waiting for more Miss Fisher in your life, then they're not a bad way to get that fix. But other than that, I don't know that they really have a lot to recommend them. It's more if you're into the show and are curious about the source material, you know, go ahead and check them out. So the first one was called Cocaine Blues. I did end up reading the 3rd one also, which was Murder on the Ballarat Train. Not bad, but again, same thing. You just could kind of tell that it came from the 80s. It was a little bit racist, so yeah, it was okay. After that, for classic romance, I decided to read Georgette Hare. I figured that that was classic enough to count. I wasn't totally sure what classic romance meant, so I went with some Georgette Hare. So I actually read a few of them. My favorite of them was The Grand Sophie, which is absolutely charming. It's basically about a girl who has been brought up by her ambassador father, sort of she's gone all over the continent, but he's going off to Brazil, and so he leaves her with his sister and her kids. So Sophie ends up living with her cousins and her aunt. And it's basically just like she's really independent and a little bit scandalous, but also everyone's really charmed by it. And it's pretty predictable, but really, really fun. And like Sophie herself is really delightful. I did this one on audiobook. This was one of those that I listened to on my commute. And the reader I actually really enjoyed. I think her name was Sarah Woodward, but I'm not totally sure on that. But the narrator was really fun, the characters were really fun. Her and Charles, which is the guy that she ends up marrying, have this really fun dynamic where like he keeps telling her like, no, you can't do the thing, and then she's just like, it's funny that you think I can't do the thing that I just did. And she's just like so nonplussed about it, and like they fight and they spar, but it's never in a mean way, and he's never unfair. And so it ends up coming across more as like they just really understand each other, and sometimes this causes friction as opposed to that like constant bickering, which is somehow supposed to signal romantic tension. I don't know. Anyway, I thought it was completely delightful. It's one of those sort of like tidying novels where basically she like breezes in, shakes everything up, causes some chaos, and then fixes everything. And I really enjoyed it. I really liked her, and I really liked the main pairing. And you know, it's a classic romance. It's kind of what you expect when you look at the tin, but you know, I enjoyed it a lot. So the next one on here is a book with non-human characters. So for this one, I actually did listen to this one on audiobook, but I already had the physical book, so I can show it to you, which is Naomi Novik's Crucible of Gold. This is book 7 in the Temeraire series, which if you don't know what that is, it is Napoleonic Wars with Dragons. Yes, really. So it's a series that I kind of go back and forth on. I always feel like I should love it more than I actually do, in that I like it, but I don't love it, because I feel like it can get a little bit dry. Some of the books aren't as good as the others. Book 2 and 3 in particular were not very good, and book 5 was also not very good. So, but book 1, book 4, and book 6 and 7 I've really enjoyed. There is a book 8 that I haven't read yet, and then book 9 is going to be the final one, and that one is coming out, I believe, later this year, but I'm not totally sure. I also have a thing with these books where I tend to read a book, get 10 to 15 pages into the next one, and then stop for like 2.5 years, pick up that book, finish it, immediately start the next one, get 10 to 15 pages in, and then stop for another like 2 years. I've been doing this since like book 3. So I was stuck about 15 pages into this one, and I decided, you know what, I don't really necessarily want to read this, but I really should, and also if I listen to it on audiobook, I won't be able to tell where the 10 to 15 page mark is. So that's my goal for how I'm gonna get through the rest of these books. I'm gonna do it on audiobook. So I can't, you know, psych myself out and 15 pages in go, oh, I can't do this, and put down the book. So what I have liked about this series is that in the first book, it seems like the history of the world has pretty much been exactly the same, just there are also dragons. But as you go further into the series, you start to realize more and more how different the history of the world is. And so in this one, we go to South America, and it's actually, the landscape of South America looks completely different than it does, or than it did in the Napoleonic Wars of our world. And we also go to Africa and Australia and any, you know, these various places, and so you end up seeing more and more where the differences are. And I actually find that to be one of the most interesting parts of this series. So I actually did enjoy this one more than some of the others that I've read. Book 3 was kind of a problem because it's basically just like they're traveling the whole novel, like they're just going from point A to point B. It didn't really feel like it should have been a full novel, so overall, I find the series kind of uneven. I find that I have a lot of difficulty remembering all of the characters, and I unfortunately find the main character one of the least interesting characters in the novel, but I still like them, I still enjoy them. The actual character of Temeraire, the dragon that he rides, is one of my favorite characters, so, you know, there's good things about it, and it is kind of fun to be reading like naval adventures, but instead of ships, it's dragons. So, and she goes into a lot of detail about different breeds of dragons and stuff. The thing is that sometimes it can get a little dry. There's a sequence in book 3 where it's just like long extended sequences of like them training in different formations and stuff, and I was really bored. So it's kind of has that Master and Commander feeling, just again, instead of ships, it's dragons. So next on the list, this is another one where I did it on audiobook, so I don't have the physical copy to show you. It was for the based on or turned into a TV show, and I did the $1,000 Tan Line, which is the Veronica Mars tie-in novel. So I usually don't do tie-in novels. I generally find them kind of obnoxious, but for this one, it's set post the movie, which I feel like I'm one of the only people that was not super thrilled with the movie. But it's set post-movie, and it is actually narrated by Kristen Bell, and it was written by Rod Thomas and Jennifer something? I don't know. I don't know if she was related to the original show, but I have sort of a complicated relationship with Veronica Mars. I loved the first season. I think it's one of the best developed seasons of television that exist on this earth. But I felt like the following seasons never really managed to hit that same level of excellence. And then I was actually kind of disappointed in the movie because I really wanted her to get out and be free. And so it was sort of like watching your alcoholic friend go back into a bar. And I was just like, why? Why are you doing this? I was not really that happy with it, but I felt like the novel managed to explain her decision more, and so made it more reasonable, and I was able to sort of come to terms with that more, and it was kind of fun to be able to catch up with everyone again, and I really liked that it was narrated by Kristen Bell. I think the next one after this is not narrated by her, so I probably won't read that one. Or I might read it in physical copy, but I'm not going to do it on audiobook because what's the point? So if you were into the show, and if you watched the movie, I would recommend reading this book. In particular, I'd recommend the audiobook because of Kristen Bell's narration, but if you didn't watch the show, it probably won't have a lot of appeal for you. So, like, you probably could read it if you've never experienced the show, but I feel like it's just mainly meant for fans of the show. But I feel like you probably could read it if you really wanted to. So, next up on here is read a trilogy. So for this one, as you might have expected, I did a YA sci-fi trilogy. And just sadly, it did not stick the landing. So I read the Mara Dyer trilogy. So the first one is The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer, and then it's The Evolution of Mara Dyer, and then it is The Retribution of Mara Dyer. I get disappointed a lot by YA trilogies, so I wasn't exactly surprised that this one didn't really manage to wrap itself up in a way that I found satisfactory, but I was still disappointed because I've read so many of them, and when they're good, they're really, really good. But it started out with so much promise, as so many of them do. Basically, it's about this girl named Mara, and she is sort of pressured into visiting this boarded up psych ward with her two friends and her boyfriend, who is the brother of one of the friends. Of course, disaster strikes, because that's what happens when you visit psych wards in the middle of the night. And the building collapses, and Mara is the only survivor. So her family moves to Florida, she gets enrolled in a new school, her dad gets a new job, and she's suffering from PTSD, and the book makes it very clear that she is suffering from PTSD and this is a real condition that she has. But she also starts to experience these other things that makes her start to sort of doubt what's happening to her. And basically what ends up happening is there's this sort of mix of the trauma that she's gone through with this supernatural thing that's starting to happen to her, and the supernatural thing ends up making her look more crazy than she actually is, and so her family ends up like putting her in these psych wards. And so it handled a lot of really heavy subject material, and I thought that it was doing it very well. It was very stressful for me to read because gaslighting is always really stressful for me to read, but it was still doing it in a way that was very deliberate and very careful, and so I was sort of impressed with that and interested to see where it went. And then book 3 happened. I don't know what the hell that was. Well, it did not resolve anything. First of all, I did not find the romance between her and Noah very convincing. Noah being the, like, hot British boy that's in their school, whatever. So this book unfortunately does kind of fall into the trap of the bickering to signify romantic tension thing, which I don't get. I would not want to be with someone that I had to argue with all the time because they wouldn't let anything go. It would drive me insane, so I just don't get that. And again, like in 359, the romance is supposed to be this like driving force of the plot, and I just didn't really find it that convincing. And there's just whole plot threads that are left completely unresolved, and anyway, it had a lot of promise and it let me down in book 3. This is a common problem, but still one that I was kind of upset to discover once again happened. I've got 3 more. Again, I know that this is long. I'm sorry. I will try to not do this anymore. I have one more ebook. This was We Are All Completely Fine. I have completely forgotten the author's name, but I'm not 100% sure that it's a novel. It might have been a novella, but I'm gonna count it anyway. I used it for the category of a book you can finish in a day. So this one is one that I really loved the premise of because it's something that I've thought about a lot, which is basically it's a support group for people that are like the last survivors of different horror movie scenarios. Because I keep thinking that. I don't watch horror, by the way. I hate horror. I just no. But when I do watch horror, or when I like read the Wikipedia synopses of horror movies, which is generally how I experience horror movies, that's always something that I think about. I'm like, these people that have survived, they're now gonna have to deal with that for the rest of their life. That's horrifying. So it's a therapy group for people that have survived horror movies. And it's got like 5 or 6 different people, and they have different types of scenarios. You know, like one person was like kept by these cannibals, and one person like was just held by like a single psychopath, and one person was, you know, like has all these symbols carved on them. And so you sort of figure out what happened to these people throughout the novel. And of course it ends up getting a little bit twisty, and it's not just about them telling their stories about what happened to them in the past. It's about something happening now, and etc. But I really loved the premise. I thought that it was well done. It read really fast, so I didn't actually find it that scary. I know that some people did, but I kind of expected it, I think, because I knew the premise, and I knew that obviously you can't have a bunch of horror movie survivors and then everything's fine, yay! But yeah, it's called We Are All Completely Fine. Gregory something might have been the author. I'll try to remember to put a link down below, or the information down below, once I actually like upload the video, because I have completely forgotten that, sorry! So I have 2 more here. First, I have a book that you read, a book from your childhood, or a book that you read as a child, something like that. I decided to read Jeremy Thatcher Dragon Hatcher again. I've read this book so many times. You can probably tell the like cover is falling apart and the pages are like completely yellow. I've read this book so many times. This is one of my absolute favorite books. It's by Bruce Colville. Colville? Something? I don't know. This is like the original copy that I had as a child, by the way. This bookcase, I'm just gonna show you real quick. This bookcase here is my original childhood bookcase with pretty much all the same books on it. So I have a lot of old copies of things that I read as a kid. So this is one of sort of a series. I didn't really enjoy the other books in the series as much, but it's like the Magic Shop books or something like that, where basically in each one a kid stumbles into this magic shop and they get this magical item or artifact, and then they have adventures, and then at the end of the book they've learned an important life lesson. So this one obviously was gonna be my favorite because it was about dragons, like, obviously. So basically this kid, again, stumbles into this magic shop, he gets this dragon egg, which, you know, he originally sees it and he's just drawn to it for some reason, and then he asks the shopkeeper like how much it is, and he says, oh, you don't want that. And he's just like, no, but how much is it? And then eventually he says like, oh, it's a quarter. And he says, I thought you said that I didn't want it. And he goes, you don't, it wants you. So basically, obviously it hatches a dragon, and he has to, you know, it's sort of his adventures about feeding it and taking care of it and learning to let it go, and it has to go back to its own world. And I don't know why it was the book that stuck with me the most when I was a kid. I mean, there's a few others. There were a couple others I could have chosen, but for some reason, this just does it for me. I love this book. I've loved this book for so many years. It was like formative in my childhood. There was a line in here. So Jeremy's dad is a vet, and they live sort of on the outskirts of town, and so they keep their patients in their house because they have like a barn behind their house. And so he's going out to help his dad with the patients, and there's this cat that ends up swiping at him, and he's like getting mad at the cat, and then his dad says like, now, what do we say? And he goes, there's no sense being mad at a cat for being a cat. And that always stuck with me for some reason. Like, there's just these things that happen when you read these books over and over again as things stick in your head. And that's always a phrase that's stuck in my head, and even sort of pertains to things that I'm doing now. Like, I have a cat, and sometimes he does things that really make me mad. And I'm like, you know what? There's no sense in being mad at a cat for being a cat. So thanks, Jeremy Thatcher Dragon Hatcher. Thanks for that life lesson. Last but not least, I have one more category to go through. Again, I'm sorry that this is so long. This is for a book set in a different country. I kind of knew that this is what I was gonna do for this book. I did Foxglove Summer by Ben Aronovich. This is book 5 in the Rivers of London series, which is an urban fantasy series. It's basically magical crime solving. The main character is police detective, and in the first book he gets sort of pulled into this supernatural crime where basically a ghost shows up and says, hey, I saw the murder, I can tell you what happened. And so he ends up sort of getting pulled into the special forces, and he ends up becoming apprenticed to the last remaining wizard in England. It's a whole lot of fun. I love this series. It's not young adult, so if you're like younger or you're thinking about getting these for someone that's younger, I don't know that they're necessarily appropriate for like really young kids. One of the things that I really like about this series is there's a really strong sense of place, because it's set in London and it's very rich. It's very, like, you can tell that it's set in London, and it feels very, the city feels very alive and very real, and that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about it. And so this one was kind of fun because in this one he leaves London for the first time in this entire series, and so he goes out to this little town in the country and he has to adjust to being in the town and dealing with small town people as opposed to city people, and I just really love this series. I was a little bit concerned when I finished book 4 how book 5 was going to turn out, because there's a thing that happens at the end of book 4 that meant that book 5 could sort of go either way. I wasn't totally sure if I was going to enjoy it or not, but I felt that the way that the fallout from what happened in book 4 was handled in a way that was true to the character, in a way that fit the narrative, in a way that was not like cliched and trite. So I actually thought that it, you know, did it really well, and I find Peter really charming. Peter's the main character. One of the things that I love about him is that he's very curious, and that sometimes gets him into trouble, but he just really wants to know things, and I can appreciate that in a main character. Someone that just really wants to know things, even to the detriment of forgetting to do something he was supposed to do because he got so caught up in wanting to really know something. And so he's really fun, and the whole like environment is really fun, and the way that magic works is really interesting. And so I have loved this series since book, I think 2 came out. Well, I think they brought over book 1 and 2 at the same time from the UK, which is something that drives me crazy, is that the release dates for these are like months after they come out in the UK, we finally get them. And so every time it comes out in the UK and I'm just like biting my nails waiting for it. So I will obviously keep reading this series. I don't know when book 6 is coming out, but book 1 is called Midnight Riot in the US. I think it's called Rivers of London in the UK, which is partly why people get confused, but it's the Rivers of London series. Book 1 is called Midnight Riot, and then 2 is Moon Over Soho, I think, if you wanted to get into them. And again, book 5 is Foxglove Summer, and I just have a lot of fun with this series, and I will continue to have a lot of fun with this series. Because it is magical crime solving, it does tend to have that feeling of sort of like the police procedural TV show, where like each episode has this own, you know, new set of guest characters, and, you know, there's this mystery to solve, and each book is a self-contained story, but then there's like an overarching story that, you know, goes through all of them, and each book advances the main story a little bit, as well as wrapping up its own, self-contained story as well. So if you are a fan of urban fantasy, if you're a fan of police procedurals, either one of those, I think you would really enjoy this book. I've really enjoyed this whole series because that's kind of exactly where my interests intersect, so it's been really good for me, and maybe it would be really good for you. I don't know. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me today. So many things, sorry, and I didn't even get to really talk about them as in depth as I would have liked to, but again, too many things. I'm gonna try to do this again. I know I keep saying that, and then each wait is longer than the last one. I'm sorry. Work's been really, really crazy for me, so that's where I'm coming from, and I don't know when it's gonna slow down, so I keep saying I'm gonna try. I might not do very well. Hopefully my life calms down, but anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!